Welcome to DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build better tech. Today we've got a bit of a different episode for you, talking around finance and how we might manage capital in small to medium businesses. And I've brought on Tanvir Uddin, who is the founder of Wholesum, which is all focused on supporting sustainability investments. Uddin has a great... Tanzania has a great background in startups, being around this space in a little while, and he's just founded this business. And I want to talk to him about his experience and what it might mean for a business that's looking for investment, or even investors that are looking to invest in different areas. Tanzania, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Andrew, for having me.
Now, before we dive in a little bit about Wholesum, tell me about you, because I'd love to find out about the founders and what your experience has been to get you to this point at this stage in your career.
Yeah, sure. So I started my career sort of in consulting. So I was at McKinsey for a couple of years. And then probably the last 7-8 years of my career, I've ventured in sort of working in the intersection between finance, technology, and sustainability. And I did a couple of stints overseas. I worked in Indonesia with small farmers and in the agriculture sector. I worked on large solar farm financing in the Middle East. And then returning back to Australia over the last 5 years, I've worked in a number of startups across Bright, where I did solar PV financing, also co-founded an electric vehicle startup that was providing car financing, but also a marketplace through software. And then I exited that business last year to found Wholesum, which is where I basically culmination of all my previous experiences into try and offer something that's new and innovative and drawing upon those overseas experiences.
A fascinating experience. Tell me a little bit about working in rural areas supplying finance. What was that like?
Oh, very, very, it's an eye-opening experience, and just goes to show that, with all the globalization and with all the transfer of technology, there are still parts of the world that are disconnected. The community that I worked in Indonesia, one of them actually didn't have running water, electricity, or even mobile phone towers. And yet they're very much connected to the global economy through supplying very important things like food commodities. We take things like coffee and cocoa for granted and we consume it every day. And yet a lot of them are supplied by very small farmers on small plots of land, as they call smallholders. And that was a bit of an aha moment for me in seeing that, a little bit of capital could unlock a lot of benefit. And the economics were amazing in terms of there's an opportunity to share value with investors, with the farmers, and also any other intermediaries. Basically that was one of the inspirations that led me down to creating Wholesum.
Yeah, it's fascinating when we, like you said, we have a coffee or we go to the cafe, order one, but we don't really understand how that gets there. It's quite eye-opening just to hear that and be right in the middle of it and helping support that. So in terms of the inspiration for Wholesum, you mentioned that a little bit, but what made you make the jump from EV company to Wholesum itself? What was that shift in your mindset or thinking?
Yeah, so I worked in the two startups that I worked in Australia, so both Bright and Vira, I was involved in a part of the business which is known as debt securitization, which is how do we get capital from investors to try and finance innovative new products and solutions. So at Bright, it was solar PVs, so people can have rooftop solar and batteries. And then with Vira, it was looking at electric cars and helping people obtain electric cars and finance that. And I saw that there's a gap there to obviously provide both new investment solutions for investors like family offices, high net worths who want to support more sustainability. But on the other hand, there's need to allocate that capital towards innovation and new segments of the economy that's coming up. And when I looked at that, I knew that small, medium businesses are some of the most capital hungry and they're underserved. It's the same whether it's in Australia or in Indonesia or anywhere in the world. They small and medium businesses make up typically more than 50% of the workforce and also contribute a large percentage of the gross domestic product. And I spent some time working with SMEs in Indonesia, and also when I was in the Middle East, I came across a lot of fintech platforms that were trying to use technology to try and help bridge that funding gap, whether it be things like credit-based algorithms that would use AI or other means to accelerate that process, and also payment transfers. So I was clued into that scene, and I knew that there was an opportunity to invest in them So then I put the two together. I said, okay, let me try and create a new investment solution that can channel that interest in sustainability and finance, and obviously to provide solutions for investments for companies that needed that capital.
We've been a little bit around this space, supporting a startup out of Singapore, actually, a company called Credilink. You may not have heard of them. Similar thing, so providing technology to support more the underserved markets. And it's just a fascinating space as to the opportunity in that world, and how you might partner with them to drive opportunity for both investors as well as the businesses, because they are, like you said, underserved. That was a bit of an eye-opener. So we supported a group a couple of years now back, and it was good to understand how they might turn to something a bit more technological to support people. But you need capital and technology. You can't do
Absolutely.
without both.
Yeah, that's it.
The tech's one thing. If you don't have the capital to support it, it's never going to really fly.
Yeah.
And then the other area that I found was a bit of a challenge. If you're the new kid on the block or a new financing business, how do you drive interest? How do you bring investors to the table? How do you drive customers to you? I think it's probably easy to draw a customer in, because there's a lot of people that are hungry for capital, like you said.
Yeah.
But from an investment arm, what's some of those? How do you drive them into your ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, that's a challenge for any new founder, even if they're trying to find customers. People are usually very wary of new players, or if they're having to change, and there's a stickiness factor. But I think it comes down to having a very unique story, and being able to back that story by the experiences you've had, or the people that you've worked with, the institutions you've worked with. So for me, it was really easy to draw a link between all my different experiences, whether it be in consulting, whether we're working in agriculture finance, solar PVs, working on solar farms in the Middle East, and to see that, okay, so I've specialized in this space. I also have a PhD in microfinance, so I've worked in the regulatory side of things with my research, and so I've sort of brought those threads together. But also before, so that's more about the branding and the story, and sort of having the robustness of the operation. But also, prior to launching a product, any startup founder would spend time understanding the customer pain points, looking at competitors, and doing some trial testing and validation. So I spent 3 years working with a close group of angel investors, friends and family, who are obviously the first people to support you, to really test the investment thesis and to find out, okay, what are your investment pain points? Does this offer a solution for you? And on the other hand, trying to find good opportunities for investment opportunities, obviously. So that process took a number of years. And although I had some inkling about wanting to do this for a while, it's when I had the experience plus the testing and really the timing in the market, all of that kind of aligned. That's when I kind of was able to launch this.
Any business, you need to go through that process, and it does take
Absolutely.
time. So,
yeah,
and a background of experience is really necessary if you're in the space of just anyone wants to build a business. If you don't have the experience, you need to bring it in, or you need to learn and build out that experience. So, a part of the testing with friends and family, how did you find that process? What were some of the things that really worked? What's some things that you needed to alter and change?
Yeah. So it can be a double-edged sword sometimes. Obviously they want to back you and support you, but they also have very high expectations. So I think the main learning was to take them along the journey, all the highs and lows, and being very transparent of what's working, what's not working. Often that builds conviction and trust, and they're brought into that broader mission beyond just a transaction. Like, a lot of the case, family and friends who came in and they wanted to invest in the investment strategy, they're looking for a quick return and wanting to feel like added something. But I think what I was able to do really well was to take them along all the different iterations of the testing, tell them about what the progress is, and share the long-term vision. And so that was really helpful, because when it came down to raising a pre-seed round for the startup, I was able to go to a lot of them and say, look, is this of interest? We've had some people interested. Would you also like to participate in our pre-seed raise? And a lot of them were able to kind of say, yeah, look, this is great. We've only benefit, but we see the broader opportunity and the broader problem you're trying to solve. So that was really good. I guess the learnings as well is that you've got to develop really good, use the opportunity to develop really good habits around your reporting, your kind of engagement, and having a system to do that. So I think one of the things I probably needed to invest more into is developing really good CRM systems. And so now I'm building that and focusing on that. I didn't do as much on that when I was in the testing phase. So I think if you build those real foundations for your communications, and all the way through to using, anything like Notion or email newsletters and things like that, having that in place really helps you when you then want to continue building that brand equity and value. The other thing as well is I think I'm seeing that a lot of early founders are utilizing a content strategy as a way to grow their brand value and communication. I probably didn't invest in that soon enough. But I'm now getting onto and playing catch up. I think that's something that I think when you're in the testing phase, it's really great to show your broad audience, even if they're not your customers or they're not interested, to kind of see how you moved along that journey. So I spent 3 years obviously doing the testing validation, but I didn't have a lot to show for it on primarily LinkedIn, where I do a lot of my comms. So that's another learning that I'm taking on.
It is significantly important if we can just share. I think speaking to many founders, it's a bit of a reluctance early days just to open up and just share everything you're doing. It's more of a fear-based thing. Should I share everything? But reality is, if you don't do that, you're not going to get the learnings quick enough. And instead of taking you 3 years, might have taken you 1. Those types of things. Not saying in your case it is, but it could speed up the process. So we have to look at the positive rather than someone's going to steal my idea. We get a lot of that with people we speak to. It's quite fascinating, but we hold on and we think the idea is everything, but in reality it's not. If you've been in business for a long time or been around it and startups, etc., it's really about just execution in the end. Ideas will change over time. The way you execute will change over time, and it will continue to evolve. It's never going to stay as it is.
And the consistent thing in all that are the key people. And at the end of the day, when you are sharing content and you're what you're showing to people is that you're committed, you've been around for a while, and that you know something of value. And it'll take some time to build that sort of leadership in that thinking or the systems. But that's what people bank on at the end of the day.
Now, back to Wholesum, one of the key things you talk about is responsible investing. Tell me a little bit about that approach and how you validate that you're responsibly investing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so responsible investing for us is really 2 things. One is filtering out industries and activities that we consider to be harmful and not beneficial for the world. Things like alcohol and sort of the effects of that, animal testing and sort of harmful animal practices. And so we filter out a number of these different industries and practices that we don't want to be associated with. But on the other side, it's then looking at where can we direct capital that's going to have an incremental beneficial impact in the world. And primarily for us, it's through providing access to finance and capital to segments, communities, industries that don't normally get that capital. And yet at the same time, they can be very catalytic from a social and environmental perspective. So just to give a couple of examples of that. So we've done a number of investments into Indonesia where the banking and financial system has matured in a long way, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be to support the vast majority of its enterprises that are small and medium enterprises. And when we're providing capital for these small businesses, they're able to fulfill and meet contracts with larger companies. They're able to hire workers and contribute to growing their communities in a sustainable way. So that capital has been very catalytic. Another example is we invested into an agribusiness that is vertically integrated, which means that they are not only sourcing and producing the commodity, in this case it's Brazil nuts in Peru, but they're also processing, exporting, and then retailing ultimately to final customers globally. And this company is part of, their parent company is very well established, but what they wanted to do was something different. They wanted to be able to employ more women in their workforce. They wanted to be able to pay above minimum wages in the Peruvian Amazon where they work and they produce. And they also wanted to reinvest in environmental conservation. So this is a company that really aligned with what we're trying to do. And it kind of goes to show that you can align capital with purpose. purpose. And we went in quite a big way into that company, and we look for great deals like that. So responsible investing is making sure the investment is not involved in harmful industries according to our sort of philosophy, and at the same time directed towards businesses and projects that are going to have a noticeable social and environmental impact. In terms of validation and sort of understanding that we've got a clear theory of change, which is give capital to businesses in markets where they're going to have positive impact. And then as we scale and get bigger, we want to go back and do more case studies and evaluations. Currently, we're running a crowdfunding campaign with a social enterprise platform called Start Some Good. And part of that crowdfunding campaign is we want to raise some money to go out into the Peru and Amazon to study this company that we've invested heavily in, and to bring those stories to life. Because I think people understand things like property investing very tangibly, or they might understand like they buy shares.
Been grown up around that, and we understand that simple.
Yeah,
this is very different.
Exactly. That's right. So it's part of my job is because I've lived and seen that. Like I've met these farmers and I've worked with small businesses for most of my career. I want to try and bring that out to people and say there is a way. You don't need to be an uber rich person investing in a very large solar farm or buying a lot of affordable housing units to help make a difference in the world. You can support segments of the economy with smaller amounts of capital and maybe not even have to leave it out there for years on end to do something meaningful. It's just a matter of connecting that. And that's what Wholesum is about. We're trying to provide that bridge between the opportunities and the investors who want to participate in them.
And you mentioned a great little company, Start Some Good, that crowdfunding program. I know Tom a little bit. He was on our podcast, episode 56, way back years ago. Great for people to look at who are considering investing in this space because you're very aligned into your thinking. Start Some Good is very aligned in terms of sustainable investing, supporting this area from a crowdfunding perspective. How does it work together? What do you, from a collaboration, so you bring a project to the table?
So Start Some Good in partnership with Catalyzer, which is a migrant-focused entrepreneurship program, which I participate in the Accelerate in the 2023 cohort. And then First Nations is another group that supports Indigenous founders in Australia. So those three came together and they designed a program called Diverse Perspectives, which is funded by the City of Sydney to support social enterprises. We were fortunate to be part of this initial cohort. And at the back end of that program, we launch a crowdfunding campaign that supports our mission using the Start Some Good platform. And so that's what we're in. We've just launched those campaigns, and there'll be a pitch night on the 14th of June if any of your viewers want to attend. Basically, it's a collaboration with some incredible organizations and all kind of mission focused. So it's an exciting time to be in the space, particularly here in Australia. Now the federal government is pouring a lot more money into social enterprises as well. So we're seeing a lot of these trends that have been emerging in the last couple of years really come to fruition. And sort of Australia, it was kind of perhaps behind, but it's come a long way.
Yeah, it's brilliant to see everyone collaborating in that way and looking to drive this further. In terms of the trends you're seeing, there are a lot more people going down this space in terms of data. What does it look like, the growth into sustainable investing? Where are we going as a globe? Who are some of the leaders in this space, or which countries are leading this area?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we're seeing is that the ecosystem is strengthening. And what I mean by the ecosystem is everything from investors to accelerators who support and mentor businesses and founders, and also the data and the ability to measure and support from a technology perspective. So these things are coming together in a way that wasn't there before. And Australia perhaps lagged a little bit of Europe and North America in some regards. But now I think both from the work of the impact investing space, the social enterprise space, the nonprofits have really come together to really convince the government and broader stakeholders that we want to create a more integrated economy where we don't kind of say we're going to make a lot of money here and maybe do a lot of harm as well, and then somehow divert that into philanthropy and try and fix the problems that we create in the first place. We're going to design a whole.
That's the point, really. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. And that whole ecosystem has lagged, obviously, the startup system, which obviously that itself lagged other parts of the world. And like, if you look at the 10 years now, Australia is a formidable force in tech startups. So I think the next thing is then to try and create full mission mission-aligned and social enterprises in that ecosystem as well. I think the other thing, of course, is that we're seeing a lot more activity in the private market. So if we think about public markets being sort of your stock market, where companies are listed and everyone gets, it makes the AFR news. Now with the whole startup scene, but also with a lot more allocation of capital into private enterprises that are not listed on a major stock market, we're seeing a lot of really amazing things happen there and quite significant influence. If you look at, for example, Grok Ventures by Mark Cannon Brooks, and you look at these family offices who are directing capital in new and interesting ways, and the businesses that they're supporting, you look at, for example, when they invest into Who Gives a Crap, which donates 50% of their profits to charity. So I think that the private markets are really leading some of these trends. And I think that we're realizing that the world is a lot bigger than just the public markets or just a few industries. But yeah, it's going to be an ongoing effort. And I think that more government support and more people coming back into the ecosystem saying, let's try and build it. If it's at the mentorship, the accelerators, all of that. So the City of Sydney program is a really unique one because it's supporting underserved communities, First Nations, migrants, and it's focusing on social enterprises. So it kind of brought those two things together.
Yeah, the good insight into what's happening in the market. In one area of investors also, they're looking for a return. How do you balance the social environmental impact that people are having compared to return? Or you're finding that there are great returns in this space for investors as well. That's just really funneling money in a better served area.
Yeah, so obviously there are many different type of companies and projects, and they'll have different sort of profit profiles. There'll be some initiatives that need to be completely philanthropic. Like if you, let's say, on one extreme, there's a natural disaster and emergency, you're not going to make a return out of it, and you probably shouldn't. And then, but I think that there is the area that we're working in, where small and medium enterprises typically in their local markets are paying a premium because they're seen as slightly more risky and they're seen as more challenging to invest into. There is a premium on that return. We don't need to necessarily charge at the market rates or rely on that, but it can still be very competitive. So our target return at the fund is net return to our investors at 8% or more. So it's very competitive against things like leaving your money in just a bank account and get a fixed term deposit. And it definitely beats inflation. So which is what our goal is, because we're trying to be more of a passive income fund as our strategy. So we find that there are opportunities there, and we focus on that. And this is necessary for in a current environment where there's a cost of living crisis, that investors feel like they're getting value, and we focus on that. There are, of course, other initiatives out there that are lower return, but it's going to be only suitable to a smaller segment of the markets, perhaps like your ultra high net worths who may be thinking more philanthropically. But I think this is where the innovation's coming in, which is how can we blend the two together and still provide something that's commercially feasible? I think that's the goal of founders, entrepreneurs, financial managers, to blend that. And I think Who Gives a Crap is a really good example of that, that there's still a way to do that. Another one is Humanitics. I think it's just, we shouldn't be limited by those perspectives. I think at the end of the day, it's about, are we solving a custom problem? Is there a sizable market? And then ultimately, the business model will take care of itself if we kind of started with those fundamentals.
Yeah, makes sense. If I'm an investor coming into Wholesum, is there specific funds you could be a part of, or is it just at this stage one fund you're in and basically investments are driven by Wholesum?
At the moment, we are a wholesale fund, so it's for accredited investors and institutions. And we only have one fund at the moment that's focusing on this small and medium enterprise strategy. As we grow the funds for this operation, we may start to introduce new products as well. But we started with this as something that is, I guess, competitive in the market and solves some of the problems there. We there's many other stock market focused funds, and there's a lot of fintechs and some social focus in fintechs that operate in the stock market or even in property and affordable housing. But we've got our own niche at the moment that we're focusing on.
Brilliant summary of what you're up to, and thank you for sharing. What gets you up in the morning? So what drives you to be a part of this? Because you've got a big smile on your face and I can see the passion behind it, which is great to see when I'm talking to someone. So love to understand what drives you every day.
I feel really privileged that every day I'm talking to my clients, and my clients are quite diverse from many different backgrounds. But at the end of the day, I see that they are hardworking people or organizations who want to do better with their money. Like they want to be looked after from a commercial and financial perspective, but they have an aspiration to make a difference in the world, and they're trying to do their bit. So I really enjoy those conversations, and I enjoy learning about them and what they're trying to do, and trying to see if I can help them. And even if I can't help them today, it's that relationship, and I think that's what gets me excited. And through that effort, I meet people who are trying to make a difference in their careers, in their jobs, professions, and also in their businesses. And I also have non-profit clients as well, and that gives me a lot of hope. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom in the world out there, but often all you need to do is have a chat with someone who you don't normally speak to, and you can learn a lot from what they're trying to do.
A lot of doom and gloom, but it's all about what we focus on, right? And what we listen to and who we engage with, and that can change perspectives very quickly.
Yeah.
So that's good insight there. Well, thank you for coming on. If anyone wants to reach out and learn more about Wholesum, both from a SME or an investor side, how can they reach out to you?
Just to follow us on LinkedIn, so our Wholesum page, or email us at hello@investwholesum.com, and that's the best way to get in touch.
Well, Tanvir, thank you for joining me on the DevReady Podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time. Love to hear how you're going in 12 months' time and how it's all tracking for you. But yeah,
Absolutely.
exciting times ahead.
It was an absolute pleasure, Andrew. Thank you for having me.